leading into the battling. So there's battle. There's an internal battle going. Make sure you can hear with my mic now. So there's an internal battle going on. So the Southwood, they use the art of separation. We already talked about what that is. It's to darken you. So to make you like what we call Westwood. And they've done that by taking away the keys. The keys is the revelation of Jesus Christ, or what we call the secret arts. So again, we got to use the Northwood to fight to keep your Eastwood. Right? You got to fight to keep yourself, first, a bright human being. Because when you're bright and you keep the commandments of God, God's going to be on your side. He's going to fight for you. His Spirit will go with you. We won't get into that more down here. But He opens up doors for you to get in position because His power is with you, His army's with you, His angels are with you to help to get into position to win in your nation. But it doesn't just work by angels alone. He works by a physical army too. So you got to have a body of people to get into position to be able to take over those high places. And then, but also you got to have a body of voters to vote to get the right people in position. So you got to have a body built up. That gets into the whole gather and scatter that we talked about before. You got to gather up a body, but you got to internally gather too. So we got to know there's both sides to this. So hold on a second. So we got to use the Northwood to fight for the Eastwood. So the Northwood has tactics to it. There are tactics and weapons. We're going to get into that on the next video. So to fight for your Eastwood, to keep your heart right, but you also need the tactics of how to take over. Okay, so we a little bit talked about taking over the high places, some of that. So on the other side, how do you build a Westwood inside someone? Well, through seduction. Remember we talked about art of separation, art of seduction. To seduce you, to begin to darken you, they got to get you to disobey and rebel against God. So, and they did that by, taking away the keys, not only just the keys of knowledge of four squares, but also the keys to walking in holiness, walking upright and standing in righteousness. Because when you keep God's commandments, His presence goes with you, and that's how you actually conquer your enemies, not just physically, but internally too. And we could do a whole lesson on that, but to disobey and rebel, they're going to try to get you to fall backwards, we call backslide, to turn out the way. That's when you're crooked, you're not straight. You're not straight in your paths, now your paths are crooked. You're crooked, corrupted, polluted. Turn out the way, right? So you have to deceive and be deceived. We call the lies. And eventually it's called to subvert you. And what that looks like, it brings your head down versus look up to heaven and look upon God and call upon Him and consider Him and think about Him. Like, it closes your eyes. It gets you to look at yourself. Makes you blind and ignorant, and now you're asleep. We call blue pill. We got into that before. So these are kind of some of the things, a big picture of some things. Now we're going to get into in the future, like what are the tactics of seduction? You just know, right? I told you before, they sell you life, liberty, and peace, first in political policies, but it goes way more than that. We talked about, the left wing political spectrum of these groups, that they've turned into hate groups, but they sold those people on certain ideologies that actually make them disobey and break the commandments of God and get them to rebel. And that's why they're agnostic and atheists. Well, I don't need to keep the commandments because I don't believe in God. I don't need to worry about hell. I don't believe in it. So there's no punishment for me. I do whatever I want. And there's no repercussions. I just won't hurt people, and there's balance and things like that. They make up their own law in their own head, right? So they can justify why they're not keeping the commandments of God. And there's a whole reason for that too, individually and in different groups. But i.e., that's kind of the seduction. They'll darken your countenance, right? So Now, because of Westwood and Southwood, we got to learn to fight, to battle. There is something eventually I want to get into called the 7 sevens. Super, super deep stuff, but we're not ready for it yet. There is, everything's 7, right? We had the 7 spheres of influence, the scale of 7 going up, scale of 7 going down. But in essence, what these are 7 different scales that form the mind of Christ, or the revelation of Jesus Christ, the secret arts. They're broke down into 7 different scales and symbols that allow you to understand what I am actually breaking down comes from these 7 scales. It's not been done yet. This is brand new. That's why I wrote everything out, because this is a very hard subject to talk about and to break down with this language that I learned it from. So, but it's coming so far. So now, because we have to learn how to fight, battle, and war, because of pyramid schemes that deal with money, right? And now, not all pyramid schemes deal with money. There's something I wrote here in my notes. I want to check. Yeah, there's different levels to this. And we'll get into that in the future. But there's, the whole money system. There's things like buying and selling, giving and receiving. There's more to it, but I'll leave it there. But in essence, the pyramid schemes make you one-sided. They're one-sided deals. They're tipped scales. We tip the scales one way or another, right? They make things uneven and unequal. Okay, so again, that's called the Southwood. You also have to fight and battle and war because of internal peace and happiness, your spiritual condition. So we know that internal peace and happiness comes from your Eastwood, having a relationship with God. But they want to set up a Westwood in you that sets up that stone of emptiness. The way that stone of emptiness comes is by breaking you by takeaway. So the takeaway was the art of separation we talked about here. They take away the keys, but so what it does is that when you're broken, it also leaves wounds inside you. So now you need healed internally. That's what makes you, get bitter with God or something. Someone change up the doctrines that they did in art of separation. The Pharisees came Jesuits, change up the doctrines, and they tell you weird stories like God will break your leg and then heal it to prove He's God. So you don't really know what's a curse and what's tribulation and you don't know who to point the finger at. Did God do that to me? Did I do that to me? Did the devil do that to me? If God's doing that, then He's not really a good God. And you have all these questions where you just don't know how anything works. That can leave wounds inside you because it can make you bitter. So they take away remove and take away the ability to know how to build, which is the Northwood, but also take away knowledge. That's what the key is. They took away the keys of knowledge, which is 7 sevens, broke down into 7 sevens. So that scatters your power. Remember, it talks about your power is your right hand. So your power is either weak or it's strong. You have a weak hand or a strong hand. And there's a scale for that, 1 through 7. So they have to weaken our hand. They got to stop our Eastwood. And last time we talked about some of these things, but they take away the daily sacrifice. What does that mean? Basically, you live for yourself. The daily sacrifice was God made 7 days of the week, and Paul the Apostle said, I die daily. That is actually the answer for your Eastwood. You're going to have to die daily. It's Paul's pattern. That's how you get your Eastwood. It's Paul's pattern. So basically, they get you to seek your own and not the things that are Christ's. So if you want to know whether the things are Christ, you got to get a Bible. So I'm not going to get into that because there's so many teachers out there that can tell you good principles. I'm giving you stuff that we're missing. So you got to stop the Northwood as well. They took away the key of David. Now, the key of David, again, is the ability to build, which is to know how to take over a nation through the high places. That's the ability to conquer externally and internally. So you have to conquer your nation externally by getting position to make sure there's laws that can bless your nation. That's why Republicans are conservative, and that's why they care about certain conservative laws. Because if you break certain laws, like the whole Roe versus Wade and stuff, I know there's pro-abortion and people are pro-life, right? The reason why you won't be pro-life because you believe that you're murdering babies, and there's judgment for that. God will judge a nation. There's curses that will come. That is a spiritual time. There's a internal time and external times. You can tell what's going to happen in your nation by externally grid work, but there are also times you can read of the air. Remember, we talked about the frames of the air, which is your times and your temperature. You can read a temperature over a nation when it's getting so dark. God eventually judges it with a curse. That's why you got war, famine, pestilence, noisome beast. That's also in the 7 sevens. Judgment. God will judge you for living out wicked ways. So, but he also judges, when you oppress someone. That's what God's very particular about, you oppressing the poor versus considering the poor and blessing them. That's why you got to think about the poor. Why are the poor poor? Poor people are poor because of pyramid schemes and ignorance. So the rich should be helping the poor, but not through the government, through charity is the way the rich should be helping the poor. Not now handouts are okay, but not when they're law and now you're just taking it and you entitle someone. Like, I should have that. Well, that person worked hard for it. Let's teach you how to do it. Understand? But some of those people that also worked hard for it also worked pyramid schemes. That you should be mad about that, but don't be mad about normal working and earning a profit and earning a living. That's okay. And the people that are blessed, they do give. The good people with the Eastwood in their heart. It's the Westwoods you should be considered about, and that's not any particular race or group. That's just whoever learned the principles of how to rob you and oppress you. Okay, so the keys of David will give you the ability to conquer externally and internally, because God's with you. His Spirit will be with you, and He gives you the strategies to those high places. So the end here. So the church has a setup. They set up the Southwood right now. A lot of churches are in pyramid schemes. Why? Because the pyramid schemes are in our government. When you control a nation's currency, you control inflation. Therefore, when things are expensive, you have to borrow from banks. Money changers, which is a Babylonian entity in a government, sets up for banking. So now these guys can lend upon usury, which is it's in the Bible. Don't do that. That's lending upon with interest. You're supposed to do that to people that you really don't know, because you want to make sure you get your money back, and you're making a sacrifice. But they turned it into a business, and we all buy from it. We all use this. We bought into it, and we use it to buy with. So everything is borrowing and paying back and using credit cards and all that stuff. That's not normal. We bought it as normal because the entertainment industry has been programming us to buy as normal. And all that's about to change. So now the Catholic Church, I'm talking about the denomination Catholic Church. They owned a lot of property because they knew these revelations of the first church, before they was taken over by Jesuits, and they own a lot of property in the world. But these guys are conquered internally, right now. The same way, that's the last thing I'll say, is really the same way the Pharisees infiltrated the Israeli nation, the Jews, the same way the Pharisees and Sadducees infiltrated and was changing the meaning of the scriptures for them. Well, when they had, because of Jesus, called them out, God raised up a deliverer to set that generation free. And later, when the gospel was go to the nations, these guys rebranded, became Jesuits, so they can infiltrate where that was going, and to take over, to stop the nations from becoming Eastwood and Northwoods. They were trying to make them Southwoods and Westwoods, so they can make all the money flow back to Israel. And these were people, these were the robbers of Israel. That's the robbers of Israel were the Pharisees and Sadducees, the lawyers, the scribes, and the money changers. And they still are here today. They're in our nation. They're being kicked out. Right now we call them the deep state. We call them the fake news. And right now those things are on their way being driven out of our nation. In the sense of right now it's done kind of quietly. We don't say, it's the Pharisees and Sadducees, because right now our country is so pro-Israel, which is good to be pro-Israel, but you should be pro-Israel just as much as you should be pro the nations, because God so loved the world. What you shouldn't be is pro-robbery and pro-oppression. You shouldn't help fund Israel's wars. You shouldn't help fund any wars. You know, we live in peace. Those times of peace are coming. But that's, you know, that's kind of how the nations, how we're dealing with that today. The Catholic Church was taken over by the Jesuits the same way the Pharisees took over Israel. And so when that happened, now we're going into from the dark to the light. We had Protestant Reformations, and they still got into the Protestant movements too to try to dumb them down. But now we're in this last movement where all the truths are coming out, and now we know what they are, and we're labeling them. They're new words. You're going to have to, you may learn this language, you may learn it through our movement, or you may learn it in puzzle pieces through other movements, which is kind of happening. People are they're seeking. So, but that's where we are, and that's what we're doing. We're here to wake people up and culminate of what we came out of and where we are today. And in the next video, I'm going to go over how to fight and those weapons. We kind of have the system here now. Now we're going to get into those weapons that are used, and the topics are covered through the secret arts of 7 arts and sciences of the art of logic and the art of rhetoric, how to debate. We're going to get into all that coming up soon. Thank you.